here's a picture of the Alliance team. Today, Casey and Gail are both in South Carolina, their last day of the national training with the National Advocacy Center. But we also have Natalia in our office from DC. She's been here for a couple of weeks, so we're happy to have her here with us. I always want to say thank you to OVW, who is the sponsor of this call, and for making this possible. I always appreciate these calls and hearing what's going on with centers around the country. So we appreciate OVW making that possible for us. Just a reminder about our guiding principles. So we always try to incorporate these into all of our calls and the work that we do here at the Alliance. A quick announcement that we have opened registration for next year's conference in Fort Worth, Texas. So if you have questions, want more information, or to register, you can go to our website and find everything there. We have a very sophisticated registration website and system this year that we're very excited about. Allison Bildso here at our office is our conference coordinator this year, and both she and Natalia have put in hours and hours of work making this happen. So we're very excited. So if you are ready to register, you can do that now. So it looks like we've had a few more people join. I'm just going to go down our list, and when I call on you, tell us your name, what center you're with, and what city you're with. So Angela, I see you are on the call. Welcome.
Well, hello, friends. Angie Brandenburg. I'm with A Safe Place Family Justice Center in Oregon City, Oregon.
Great. Nice to have you. Carol, hello again.
Hi, it's Carol Shipley, Executive Director of the Stanislaus Family Justice Center in Modesto, California.
Morning, Carol. Craig.
Craig Roberts, Crystal Judson Family Justice Center in Tacoma, Washington.
Julie.
Hi, y'all. Julie Clip Nicholson. I am with the Buncombe County Family Justice Center, and we're in Asheville, North Carolina.
Wonderful. Nice to have you on the call. Michelle Morgan, welcome.
Hello, Michelle Morgan, One Safe Place in Fort Worth, Texas.
And Sonia.
Hey there, Sonia Desai, Guilford County Family Justice Center here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I'm sitting in for our director, Catherine Johnson, today.
Yes. So I think that all of you I communicate with on a regular basis.
Yay!
That's wonderful. I'm glad you're all here on the call. All right, so I will just keep moving. So as you all probably know, we are working on updating the Dream Big, Start Small manual. So each month we're discussing a different chapter together to just hear kind of what is new in this work that you all are doing, so we know what should be added and kind of what would be helpful and relevant to people who are trying to start a family justice center as we update this manual. So today we're talking about location, and I added and design. So what we know is location is not just about where your center is located within your community, but also what it's like on the inside and what the experience of being there is like from a design perspective for both staff and for survivors. So we're just going to dive right in and provide some context and then have some conversation about what you all are doing. So why do location and design matter? There's actually a lot of research on location and design and on the physical environment and this concept of place. So we know that our physical environment impacts both how we feel and what our mood is, but also how we behave and act with each other. And there's also a link between the physical environment and our sense of physical and psychological safety, which are tied together. That this concept of physical and psychological safety are tied together, but they are separate things. So we'll kind of piece that apart in a few minutes. With that image, there's this idea that we all come into the world or into an experience in a place with our own personal stressors. So whatever is going on personally in our life. And our environment can either increase that stress level or it can bring it down. So we know that the surroundings of our center can either It can be an experience or create an experience that increases the stress level of staff and survivors, or can help bring down their stress level while they're there. So again, there's a lot of research around the importance of the physical environment, which I personally just found really interesting. So there were 3 major things that have been found to be important about the physical environment. So there's this idea that our physical environment impacts our behavior and what's called our motivation to act. So for instance, if people have a difficult time finding a building, some people will either postpone going there, avoid going there, or just give up going there altogether. So there's this, researchers have found this idea of like barriers, right? And so the more perceived barriers people feel or think are there, the more likely they're going to avoid a place. So the easier we can make an experience for people to get to our center, the more likely it is that they're going to access services. And those barriers don't necessarily have to be real. Again, they can just be this perception that it's a difficult place to get to, or I have to drive really far, or there won't be parking. So if we can, as often as we can eliminate those, we're going to increase the likelihood that people will come to us. So we also know that our physical environment can facilitate or discourage interaction. So for instance, having inviting spaces and open spaces with comfortable chairs will lead people to have social interactions, and then social interactions increase social support. So here at the Alliance, we recently created a community room that's just it used to be a conference room, and now it's a living room. So it has a dining room table, a couch, and it's available during the lunch hour. And before, I think all staff used to eat by themselves individually, and now we just go in there and eat lunch together, and we're just creating community with each other a lot more and getting that social support and feeling like we're all just friends together. So our social support is increasing just because we now have access to the space that is comfortable for us to be in together. So our physical environment can also influence our mood. So there's research that shows that if a physical space has loud noises, if it's really crowded, if it smells bad, if the lighting isn't good, so the lighting's too bright or it's too dim, stress levels and anxiety goes up. So that definitely is going to impact our mood and how we interact with service providers, with our coworkers. So we know that our physical environment is important, and this is why we think it's important to be thinking about in our center. And again, what the experience is like for both survivors and for people working in the center. So going back to this idea of physical and psychological safety, so this is impacted by our physical environment. And there is a difference between being physically safe and being safe and feeling safe. So we feel safe based upon sights, sounds, smells, people, places, things, words, things that are in our environment that may be linked to trauma, and it's going to influence our feelings of safety. So people may feel less safe if the lights are off, right? That's an example. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that environment is less safe, but you may feel less safe in that environment. Being safe is actually things that reduce a risk of a potentially dangerous situation. Did you have any?
I think that as we talk about this, some of these things are really obvious, and I know some of you have put a lot of thought as to what this means with trauma-informed care and how we're talking about our centers. But I know that a lot of times for a lot of sites, there's this conversation about safety, and it's usually been framed around this kind of being safe idea of like needing to put up a glass wall or having metal detectors or locking the doors and having to let people in and ring them a doorbell rather than just letting them come into the center because staff feel like they don't feel safe. And so I think when we talk about this, and as we kind of think about the next few slides, I would encourage you all to really think about this concept of being safe and feeling safe and what that means as far as our center and our protocols and how it intersects with trauma-informed care. And I think that that's really where we're trying to incorporate and add things to this chapter. So would love to hear all of your inputs as far as those kind of realms go.
Yeah, because we want people to experience the center as safe, and that sometimes does mean things like security measures, but it also means things like what is their welcome like when they first come into their center. Mm-hmm. So it's not just that security is important, but it's this bigger picture about the kind of sensory experience that people have that will make them feel safe versus unsafe. Mm-hmm. Any comments or questions so far? So I want to dive into the conversation and just pose the first question, that how does the physical environment of your center promote this sense of safety and calming and really de-escalating a situation for staff and clients? So if people are coming in with high levels of personal stress and trauma and anxiety, what are ways that your center is working to de-escalate this and create this sense of safety and calm?
Hi, it's Angie from Oregon City, Oregon, A Safe Place. So we use, and we get a lot of compliments on our water fountains that are throughout the center. So it's in this staff area. It also helps with making it feel, warm and inviting, but it also helps with confidentiality and conversations that may be happening throughout the center. But folks love the water aspect.
That's great. So that speaks to sound and kind of also being able to have this sense of like a more comforting feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think confidentiality is tied into that feeling of safety as well, right? Mm-hmm. That you're not hearing, if I'm sitting in the lobby and I'm hearing conversations that are happening in other parts of the building, then I might be concerned that other people are going to be listening to what I have to say, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is just a really subtle way that you are creating the sense that this is a safe place to talk about stuff, right? It's not going to be heard all over the building. And I did actually read some of the stuff I was reading was talking about the importance of having natural elements in creating this calming experience for folks. So I think having water is a good example of that. Anyone else?
This is Sonia from Greensboro. One of the things that I've noticed, like when I first started my career as a victim advocate at the local nonprofit, I noticed like in the lobby, there were always like these pictures of battered women and saying like, you can contact this crisis line number, or things that were really traumatic for people to look at like when they came in. And so in our center, I feel like that's shifted. And so in our center and a lot of the different centers that we visited, it's very calming. We have couches, food, snacks, little things like that. But we don't have any brochures or anything like that out in our main lobby.
I know exactly what you're talking about with those posters. And so I think that is an interesting shift in just really starting to think about what that experience of seeing that poster is like for survivors, and kind of shifting design and the experience of being there to be more survivor centered, because survivors know why they're there. They don't need to see a picture of someone else about, Right. So I think that's great. Yeah.
This is Carol in Modesto, and we're just moved into a new building. We're very happy with the new building. It's offered us a lot of different opportunities, and we're functioning, but we have a lot yet to do as far as making it the space we want it to be. So all of your ideas are great, and I'm taking notes. But one of the things we did in the other building after we went to the trauma-informed or had some trauma-informed training was, how welcoming is our lobby? And the lobby was fairly large at the time. The reception desk was probably, 10, 15 feet away from the front door, Patricia, would you say? And
yeah, at least. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we immediately said, well, it's sure not user-friendly for children. So we got a toy. We had to make sure that it couldn't walk out very easily. So it's one of those multi-motion, you run a little peg around the wires, or you can stick forms in and stuff. And we put that on one of our tables in the lobby. And boy, the first kid that came in after we did that, he just went right to that. And so that was, to us a confirmation that we'd made the right move on that. And so we have considered that with our new place. And we're certainly looking at getting some nice soft furniture for the lobby and the waiting area. We've redone we have a different cafe set up, and it's been made user-friendly for adults as well as children. And so we're looking at each aspect as we proceed through and progress in creating the space with all these thoughts in mind. So thank you for all your ideas.
Yeah, definitely. And Carol, because you just moved buildings, I am just curious to hear a little more about your experience in going through the process of selecting a new building. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share that. I know we have a lot of centers who have been, like you, have been open for a while and are needing to expand or change buildings. And so can you just share a little bit about what your thought process was and how you made the decision?
Sure. I remember when we were first looking at our first building, what I was told by other directors at the time was figure out what you need and then multiply it by 3, because you'll be out of your place in 3 years if you build it to what you think you need. And that came true because we didn't have the money to multiply it by 3 at the time. We're a total nonprofit. And so we definitely were, bursting the seams after 3 years, and we just made do the best we could and doing that. So we knew we needed a building, but we also needed the funding to do it. And we finally had a chance with a building that was, we looked at 2 different buildings in downtown Modesto, which was a little bit closer to downtown than where we were. We were like 5 blocks away from the courthouse and our other building. These other new buildings we were looking at, one was right across the street from the courthouse, which had been great. And then the other one was maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, but closer, and on a different bus line and just more active downtown, in a downtown area. So we are not outbid, but a law firm beat us to the one that was right across from the courthouse. So a new owner ended up buying the other building we were looking at, and they had worked with nonprofits before, and I took them on a tour of our center, and they were just stunned and impressed by all the services, that we offer, which is what everybody on this call does. And they worked with nonprofits, and they've always been supportive of it. So they were really keen on the fact that we didn't have a lot of money, and so they helped us to figure out how we were going to make it into the building and what we needed to do in order to do that. So it was nice. And the contractor who we worked with was super nice as well and reasonable, and was always offering this and that and just guiding our way. So we gained 5,000 square feet without increasing our rent payment, which was nice. And we've put some things in. We put some cubicles in for volunteers, clients, with computers, so that the client can do homework or look for jobs, do their resume or whatever they may need. We also have a couple cubicles. We just started a new mental health program for our adult clients with interns, MFT interns from Brandman University. So we have 2 cubicles for them. And so we ended up being able to put all of my staff into offices, which 3 of them were in cubicles. And we're able to, instead of having like the DVSA agency, Haven, having all of their advocates in one room, they got, almost all of them got separate offices as well. So we're able to make those adjustments that I think made people feel better about, their work environment. We also were able to gain space for our break room, much like your living room, where we had to crawl over each other to get on one side of the conference room table or the break table. Now it fits very well with 2 additional round tables in the break room for staff. The one area that we haven't done anything with is the basement, which has been labeled the nightclub, because the real estate agency that was in before us, I guess, really used it kind of as a nightclub with, football parties and all sorts of things going on. So it has a bar, and it has a long conference table, and it has seating much like a nightclub. My staff told me, don't touch that. And so we're looking at it for kind of a self-care, because if you go down to that basement, you don't think you're in the building at all. It's just completely quiet. So people can go down there and relax, or will be able to. We're thinking about bringing like yoga in, masseuses, having trainings down there. The only drawback we have to the building is that it is 2 stories plus the basement, and we have no elevator. So all services are taking place on the first floor. So when we plan to have something down in the basement, we have to be careful of the accessibility issues. So, but I don't know if that answers your question, Natalia. That gives some ideas, but we got a long way to go. We tried to make the interview rooms and the group rooms, which we were able to add. So I have 2 group rooms that can be made into 1 or 2. I have an accordion door in the middle. I have 2 interview rooms plus a chapel plus a conference room. So we have those, which is more than we had in the other building. But the ability to, they put extra insulation in the interview rooms and the group rooms, and still, it's difficult to make it where you don't hear anything in those rooms. So we're looking at other possibilities. I like the waterfall thing. I think that's a great idea. We use white noise machines right now, which we may just buy more of those. But we got to put blinds up for privacy. So like I said, we have a long way to go, but we are functioning, and so we can just take our time and do it right.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. And something that I noticed that that stood out to me was that you essentially kind of courted the owner of the building and showed them your vision, so that then they were willing to work with you. So I think that's really helpful to hear that. That there may be people out there who want to help with buildings or facilities who want to expand, but just need to kind of catch the vision. So that's a good reminder. So I'm just going to keep us moving with the questions. So in what ways are your staff members recognizing and addressing aspects of the physical environment of your building that may be re-traumatizing? So we know, if we're thinking about space, we don't always have the ability to build our own building and customize and, lighting and things like that. But there are ways that we can make the facility and address the fact that some experiences in a building might not be the most welcoming or friendly. So I thought about the New Orleans Family Justice Center as an example, where in their building you have to enter into the post office and then go through doors and get scanned in, and then go up the elevator and then get to their building. So that's can be very intimidating. There's multiple places where a survivor might get lost or discouraged in that process, but they have figured out a way to kind of work with what they have. So they have a survivor who's now in their lobby that greets people, that welcomes them in, that gets them upstairs. And so they've really worked to create a welcoming environment given the building that they have. So I'm curious to hear what ways you all are doing that in your buildings.
This is Julie from Buncombe County. Our Family Justice Center is in a large 1970s government style building, and as we designed the Family Justice Center, we worked with a group of survivors to hear from them about what would make the outside of the building feel less imposing and more welcoming. And a couple of the pieces that they gave us was to make sure that there's really good lighting, to cut away some of the bushes because it felt scary that somebody might be able to hide in the bushes. But one of the really powerful phrases that one of our survivors said was, "You've got to make the building more human-sized." And so we did that by putting some planters out around the front, so it sort of pulls your attention down away from this huge imposing building. We also put an awning outside so that it doesn't feel like it warms up the front of the building a little bit. So little touches, but good feedback from survivors.
Yeah, and I think, asking survivors what would make the space more comfortable for them is like, that's what we all should be doing, right? Because they're going to be the best people to give you that feedback about what the experience is like for coming there. So I think those are really great suggestions. Anybody else? All right.
This is Carol, and I'm going to make a comment, but I also kind of am looking for feedback. We have a lot of windows in this building on the outside, in the front especially, and so we are looking to do some kind of covering, and there's lots of options out there, but we're trying to figure out, what may be the best. We can put our logo on like a graphic and put it across the windows so that you can see out, but nobody can see in on that type of material. But I didn't know if anybody else had windows like that, that they've done something with, or if you guys have any suggestions as to how we can do it. We don't want to look like a supermarket, with all different types of things up there. So we're trying to make it very consistent, and if we can do it with one broad stroke, that would be great.
Well, this is Michelle in Fort Worth, and Carol, as you've been to our facility, we are nothing but a pile of windows. And so we have had some struggles in that area. And so we've done a couple different things in our upper levels. We have tinted the upper level floors, which then really freaks you out because then you think it's dark outside and it's really not because there's tinted windows. We have in other areas, there's a shade, like in our large auditorium space. We ordered directly where the stage is, and you probably didn't even notice them when you were in the space, but we actually added black shades. So like we can still in the room physically still see out, but people can't see into us right there at that stage area. So we've added that in a couple of our training areas, especially where the sun hits in the worst possible places for client service delivery. And then what's interesting, Patricia, earlier you had the picture, which is of our chapel space that was on the screen. I'm not seeing it now. But we actually have since changed that space where that window in terms of safety and security. So, when you're sitting there, we could see out and see all of the cars there in the street, but on a sunny day, they could not see into the building. But it doesn't matter because the perception, if you're sitting in that space in the chapel, if you can see them, everyone believes that then they can in turn see you. So we have gone back in some of those spaces and actually gotten like the tall shade structures that look very homey. So it, still warms the space, but it doesn't go all the way up to the ceiling, but it does at least restrict like a 6-foot view, if you will. And then we just added more lamps to really soften that space. So we absolutely know about windows, and I will tell you the tinting on the windows is quite expensive. So we've done it in stages throughout the past couple of years, just trying to hit the areas where it causes the most problem in terms of workspace.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle.
I will probably be in contact with you.
And Michelle, I do like your suggestion of putting up the window shades. Are you talking about like kind of they pull out the like accordion kind of ones?
Yes, exactly. Like,
Okay.
they were probably originally designed for like, a small dressing area, but we've added those
Right.
like where, like, cause there's a couple of it's just randomness, like in a couple of our client service intake rooms and stuff, like partial, of it was window which that's a huge problem in confidentiality. And so we just went ahead and bought those accordion type deals. And it really does, because they're wood paneling. And so it keeps with the warmness of the room instead of doing something stiffer in those rooms.
Right. Yeah, I like that suggestion.
And they're movable. So it's kind of nice if you need to move them to different areas.
Exactly.
They're easy to move.
So So something that we talk about, and I think some of the things have already been touched on, but this concept of self-care, and creating spaces, both for staff and for survivors to engage in self-care. So has anybody created specific spaces that both either staff only or staff and survivors can use to practice self-care?
This is Michelle in Fort Worth. So in our basement area, we built a workout center for staff. Clients don't have access to go down into that space. We have showers and locker rooms down there. In the event that a client needed to go down and take a shower, we've arranged that, and an advocate would go down there in the space with them. But our workout facility is, open for staff to be able to use for, stress relief and wellness and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic.
This is Sonia from Greensboro. I love the workout facility idea. I'm going to talk to Catherine about that. But we actually just created a soft room or a quiet room for our staff members in our basement area. And so it's kind of off to itself. You can't really tell if anyone goes in there unless the door is closed, but it's a place for self-care. The lighting, like it's lamp lighting. We have a scent diffuser type thing. We've got a noise machine that has like the sounds of oceans and water and things like that. And we've got a couple of really nice, comfy couches. And so we've been taking our staff down there and just showing them. And, we said, this is not a place where you can have meetings, but this is a place to disconnect and just kind of just breathe for a little bit.
That's great. Do you know how often staff use that? Is it something that has been well received?
I think it is, and it's really interesting. I took a bunch of our law enforcement partners down there, and they were like, self-care, we don't need that. But then I have found that they are the ones that are using it. So it's hard to tell because it's off to it. It's kind of, which is a good thing. So people can't really see if someone's going in there. So it's off to itself down in our basement, but I think people are utilizing it.
That's great. And I think the fact that it's off to itself, that feeling of safety, if you're, a cop is not having to walk by everybody and show everybody like, oh, I'm going into the self-care room, right? So it's clearly a place that they feel is safe for them to go to just take a break and, have some time to themselves. So I think that's great. And I know a lot of centers, there is a space constraint, right? So you might not have a specific room that's set aside for practicing self-care, but has anybody integrated things into their waiting room or common room areas that are still promoting self-care and things that help people feel calm and comfortable?
This is Natalia. I think something that's worked really well in the OVC initiative was we had designated somebody like a trauma-informed trainer at each of the sites. And for most of the sites, these folks have now kind of become kind of like the person who has or promotes self-care in the center. And so a lot of them have gone back to their centers and even in their own offices created little areas that all staff are welcome to come sit in to just meditate or relax or whatever that looks like for all of them. And so I know a lot of them talk to me about they got lamps for their offices and diffusers and they'll have candy there and it's like a nice comfy couch and they just have made a point to really open up their office space for people, even if it's to not have a conversation, but to just come in and take a breather if they're having a stressful situation. And that's always been really nice to hear because I think a time constraint or budget constraint to being able to make a workout room or a workout area is probably a reality for a lot of our centers, but just being mindful that even our own shared spaces or offices could serve for that purpose also and just open the door for that conversation has been a really good way to integrate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having a person at the center that kind of takes the lead on that is helpful because I know This is always an idea that comes up in a staff meeting, like, oh, we should do this, or wouldn't it be great if we did that? But something we've been talking here at the Alliance about is whose back is that monkey on? So meaning when you leave a meeting and leave a conversation where someone says, oh, it would be a great idea if we, had a comfortable place for staff to go sit. When you leave that meeting, who is responsible for taking the initiative to start making that happen? So I think having someone sort of assigned to be the self-care reminder, I think is a way to ensure that is happening on a regular basis and not just this idea that comes up in staff meetings when people are starting to feel frustrated. So the next question is how has your center developed ways to address gender-related physical and emotional safety concerns? So I think this is something, particularly when you're dealing with gender-based violence, it's something that comes up in our centers as part of this emotional safety, and this feeling of safety might relate to gender-specific spaces. So I put a picture up here of the Sojourner Family Peace Center and a restroom that they have where they've just made it really clear that this is a space for everyone, regardless of what your gender identity is. And so that is one way that they have made their space feel safe and address both physical and emotional safety concerns for people who might be gender non-binary or trans, or even a parent needing to change a diaper. I think that's something that comes up, is just what, in a situation, do you know that this space is safe and okay for you to do that? But are there ways that your centers have thought about addressing this issue, are currently addressing this issue?
This is Carol. I have a question for you on that, because your question brought up a different idea. I was wondering if you were trying to say that because there's certain genders are more likely to be abusers or whatever, did we have a safe place? I was thinking that maybe we need to think about a safe place for women victims to go versus male victims or something like that. Is that anything that we should be thinking about? I mean, the opposite of that, which is what you brought out, was basically making everything all inclusive and making sure everybody knows that so everybody feels welcome. Are there two different ideas here?
So I think it might be thinking about, in some situations, someone who's a woman who has been abused by a man may only want to use a restroom that she knows is just for her, right? But we also know that we may be serving people who are male survivors, we may be serving people who are trans or gender non-binary, who also need to know that there are spaces that are safe for them and that there's a restroom where they feel comfortable using. So I think that was kind of, with this picture, I think that's what I was thinking, that when we think about gender, thinking about all genders, right? And not just thinking about, I think traditionally we have thought about making our services just for women, and many of our clients probably are women. So there may be some situations and some strategies that you need to implement to make sure that women are feeling emotionally safe in your center. But we do also know that many people are survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence, and needing to kind of consider that and maybe coming up with strategies to address that in our center. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Last call.
Last call for comments or thoughts on this. All right. So any final thoughts or comments, just based upon what we've talked about? Have there been any challenges or successes that you've had related to the location of your center and how you've designed your center that you'd like to share with us? Any words of wisdom?
This is Julie in Buncombe. I'll share two things on my wish list that if we were designing the center again today, I would have added more meeting spaces for relatively small meetings, like the 5 and 6 people meetings. We really only have 2 rooms that work for that, and with so many agencies in the building, we need more space that has that flexible use. And then the other thing that I wish is that we had more of a living room common area for clients and our Voices members and that sort of social interaction. And we talked about that earlier in the call, but those are two things that are on my wish list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Julie.
This is Carol again, and one of the things that we have that may be a little bit different is that we've had the art community as a huge supporter of the Family Justice Center and what we do with our wraparound services as well as with the children. And so we have had the benefit of having art pieces from the fundraiser that we have each year left over, and we have decorated the inside of our Family Justice Center with those art pieces, and they're really makes it so soft and welcoming. I mean, you certainly don't think you're walking into a government office with those up. And we have become part of what the city has, which is called an art walk. So every third Thursday, certain businesses open their doors for people to come in and look at art that is being displayed. So we're using that in a sense as a marketing piece, as well as perhaps a revenue producer, because our pieces that haven't sold would be up for sale. But we're also attracting other people that might not otherwise come by the Family Justice Center to learn about us. And we're also showcasing an artist each month that maybe has done some work for us in the past, so we're honoring them as well. So that's been kind of a real plus in the current situation, because we were too far away from this art walk area to do it in the other building. And so that's been kind of nice. And we had our grand opening at the same time as the art walk was in October. And so we're going to do the art walk by itself in November next Thursday. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, I think that's great, Carol. And I do think that the art that's in your center, it's very personal, and it really, I think it's something that just connects really well and is just a really great fit and very original. So like you said, it doesn't feel like a government building. It feels like a very welcoming space with that art.
I have a question, Carol, for you. This is Natalia. As far as the art, is that located all in your lobby? So are people just coming into your lobby as part of the art walk? Is it throughout the whole center? How are you guys dealing, or has there been any conversations about people feeling like other people who are not receiving services or might be unsafe are coming into the center? What has that kind of looked like for the art walk piece in particular? Are you only doing that off hours? Just general questions about that.
Yes, the paintings are throughout the building, and including in the lobby area. The art walk is after hours. It's like 5 to 8. And so, yeah, so that makes it really nice. So we're not interfering with the services necessarily, because we are actually, some of our services may be extending over the 5 o'clock hour. So that may be something I didn't think about dealing with. So thank you for saying something. But some of the pieces are not for sale. They're just up because either people have bought them and donated them back to us so that we could use them, or they've been, spoken for and people are just, again, donating them back to us. But many of the pieces are for sale. So the art walk, it allows the people to come into the building and learn more about us. We have kind of a self-guided tour that talks about the different services that they take on a piece of paper, and as they walk through with designations as to these areas. And so we're trying to do that so that we don't have to worry about having people available to be guides. But I know our kind of artist in resident, one of them, Susan Kane, who's she does a women's workshop using a Windows Between Worlds art curriculum, as well as is our child care provider. She is hoping that we can just light up the lobby area where the art pieces are being displayed, so that we can keep just like an art, well, not museum, what I want to say, just where, people can walk by, not necessarily come in, but on a given evening, walk by and see this art and go, oh, I wonder what that is, type of thing. So we haven't figured that out because the lighting isn't conducive to that. It's either all on or it's not on at all. So we haven't figured that one piece out, but lots of ideas to work around as we go forward. So.
Yeah, it almost would make the lobby seem like a gallery, which is an interesting concept as far as like how welcoming it is and what conversation is drawn from people walking by. And I think you're using this art piece as a really great way to engage the rest of the community to learn about FJC services. So that's a really interesting kind of way that you've engaged the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll have to just wait and see how it turns out.
It's always a work in progress.
Right.
Wondering if anyone found any really helpful tools when they started thinking about trauma-informed care and how your physical space and location or setup might kind of be trauma-informed, because I know that there are a lot of tools in particular around trauma-informed care, everything from like what colors really are conducive to making people feel comfortable, or something that I didn't know, and I recently learned as we were creating our Creating Cultures of Trauma-Informed Care Toolkit for OVC, was that actually in the research they found that for people and survivors of trauma, chairs that have arm stands on both sides actually create more of a safe feeling for people, rather than like a communal couch where people can get right next to you and you don't have separated space. And so I'm just wondering if people have run across anything that might be really helpful for us as we continue to talk about design and location that you have used in the past.
Hey, it's Misty. I'm sorry I missed the first 20 minutes of the call. I just want to say that a great point about the armchairs, the soft armchairs, and we have in our assessment rooms 3 really cozy armchairs that kind of almost swallow you up and make you feel really comfortable. So they're great. The design is great. My one regret is I wish that they were leather or faux leather instead of material, because there's a lot of tears shed in those assessment rooms and the needs assessment rooms with the advocates. And just for perspective of trying to not have the material stained or just being able to clean it properly would be a great choice for me if I replace those in the near future, is to make them leather or the faux leather instead of the material. But the high armed chairs are really awesome.
Thanks, Misty.
This is Carol again. One of the other things that we've talked about as we're looking at furniture for the interview rooms, the softer furniture, is that there is a request to keep a desk in there. It just kind of depends. Some people, when they're going to talk to an advocate, a social worker person, they like the soft chairs. But when you're dealing with paperwork like the civil legal unit, the client will walk right over to the desk basically and sit down, and because that's more of a comfort thing to do paperwork on versus just talking to somebody. So we're going to try to engage to have both types of furniture in the interview rooms so that people have a choice as to what's going to work best with whatever the client's dealing with at the time. I don't know if anybody else has similar things or not.
That's a good question. How are other people handling interview rooms, and how did they make choices based on what furniture gets put in the interview rooms? Did anyone have any particularly interesting way of getting to their design for that?
Well, this is Michelle. So in Fort Worth, we did both. So normally if they come and they return for an attorney or meet with a law enforcement officer to give a statement, those rooms have a comfortable feel, but they also have a built-in desk in those rooms. When a client comes in for their initial intake, there is no desk in that room, but we got basically a desk stand, if you will. So it's movable, it's mobile. It's just a very small stand, enough so someone can move it and do paperwork. So it's there if it's needed, but sometimes they don't use. What I was additionally going to add to the conversation is, one of our challenges was we needed to try, you have a building and it's set. Ours was gutted and we were able to renovate, but we tried to maximize and get as many potential intake and counselors' offices and partner agency offices in our client service delivery. And so when you do that, we then were faced with, okay, now some of these are going to be like really tiny rooms. And so how do you make sure that some of those don't have windows and they don't have open space? So how do you make sure that a client, when they walk into that room, doesn't feel like the walls are coming in on them because their room is so small? And so one of the things that we were able to do, and our interior design team kind of researched this, was with our doors, we kind of have like that plexiglass, and then it's got the greenery that goes through it. And so it allows the room to be able to give some depth. And then it also has that warm natural colors, for trauma. And you also can't see someone on the other side of that. So it also, provides confidentiality in those rooms as well. So that's just a couple of ideas that we did.
Really helpful. I cannot even visualize what you're talking about. So could you tell us a little bit more about the plexiglass with greenery that goes through it, Michelle?
Yeah, I know. And I'm very visual too. So it's like you have a wood door, but then in the middle, it's like an insert that the wood has been removed, and so it's like a plexiglass. Like I went into a Chili's a long time ago, and like I don't know why, like they hung these things from the ceiling, and it was like natural grass. Well, that's all it was. It was plexiglass with just these like natural grass and like orange colors, like kind of going through it. So it blocks it where you can't visually see the other person on the other end, but it gives that nature feel to it, if that makes sense. And we've had a lot of comments about that, and we were very concerned, like, oh my gosh, are we breaching confidentiality? Can you see on the other side? But you can't. Like, you can see maybe a shadow walking by, but you cannot make out who's on the other side of that. And one of the reasons we added that element was because some of our rooms, we wanted to maximize the space, and so some of them were really small, and so that's why we added that element, so it gave it further depth than what the room actually has, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see a picture of this door with this grass thing, because I feel like a lot of people are having trouble imagining it. At least I am. So for my own personal reasons, that would be great. But if anyone has any particularly great design ideas, like this was genius, and I would love to share this idea with other people, whether it's like a chair or I don't know, room setup or your shades, like the lighting curtains that are helpful. I feel like maybe that would be a good thing for us to collect and add into the chapter, and then also share with all of you where and how you obtained these things might be really helpful for others.
Yeah, definitely. So if you do have pictures or design suggestions or things that you would like to share, and we do get people asking us these kinds of questions. And so for us, it's very nice to be able to say, and even just have a picture that says in Fort Worth, these are the doors that they use to solve this problem.
Right.
So we would love to get as many of those things from you as possible. And you can just email them to Patricia here at the Alliance. So that would be a great addition to our resource little catalog, but also will be great to include in the book and kind of provide those kinds of updates. So as we kind of wrap up this call, I'm just curious to hear from you all if there's one thing that you've heard on this call that you can implement in your center, given your specific issue, whether it's creating a more comfortable environment or changing the design or looking for a new building altogether. So I would love to have people just share something that they would like to implement in their center. I'm happy to go down the list. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Angie Brandenburg.
Go ahead, Angie.
Hi there. So we are, of course, we've outgrown our space here, and we had a very successful strategic planning session here with Gail and Casey and Michael. So we're really excited about our future and the ability to build a family justice center within the next probably maybe, I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, but probably within the next 3 years. So all of this is really helpful. In the meantime, we are going to be putting a modular office in the back, which is going to be used for staff that are not working primarily with walk-ins, folks that are accessing services. But we're definitely going to put in a self-care for staff room, and I'm kind of visualizing like a kind of a spa, Zen kind of place. So we don't have that currently, and that's a problem for us, especially when our staff occasionally have pretty bad days and they're sharing cubicles with folks. So it's really difficult. So that's what I'm looking forward to, because I think that's really hugely important.
I agree. Definitely.
I think that will make a huge difference, especially when people have cubicles and maybe they just had a really hard intake or want to just cry it out a little bit. So I think that will be really nice for all staff.
Yeah, and I think that that's just a good reminder also that, you know, the staff make a huge difference in creating the environment for survivors. And so, you know, the importance of taking care of your staff is that they're people who are working in this space, right, and hearing really difficult stories. And if they're not able to have a place where they can work through that and take care of themselves, it's going to have this ripple effect throughout the rest of the agency. So, you know, we just know from the work that we do that the people who are working in a center can go a long way for overcoming physical environment challenges that a center may have, right? That people can go a long way in creating a really warm environment if you're not able to fully change the design of your building. So I think creating that space for your staff is going to it's going to have a big impact in the, you know, before you're able to build this wonderful family justice center in the future.
Anybody else?
This is Carol again, and I'm going to look into those water fountains, because I think that's just an awesome idea and would go really well in our new building and to help with the sound. So thanks for that idea.
Anyone else? Sonia, Craig, Misty?
This is Sonia. I like the idea of survivors greeting people in the lobby, you know, if possible, depending on time and things like that. But I think that's a really good idea, even if it's just to get them through filling out their initial paperwork, just having somebody sit with them and walk them through that process, and it particularly being a survivor.
Yeah, I think that was a great thing and it was a way for the New Orleans Family Justice Center to engage survivors who were, you know, past the crisis and really wanted to be involved. It was a way that they could incorporate them into the center, to have this peer relationship with someone who's coming in crisis and being able to say, like, I've been through what, you know, I know that this is difficult, and like, let me kind of walk you through this. I think is a very, has been a really positive thing for their center. All right. Anyone else before we end the call? Well, it is 12:30, so thank you all for being on the call and chatting with us, this small but mighty, as Gail says, team today. So again, if you have pictures or ideas or things that have worked really well, please send them to me. We would love to share them with others and incorporate them into the updates in our manual. In the PowerPoint, I have some resources. So this is where I got a lot of the information from, and some of these websites have just way more than can be shared on the phone call. So Mary Jo Kreitzer has done a lot of work on healing spaces, and so she, a lot of it is focused on medical centers, so hospitals, but it just is very relevant because we're also in the process of helping people heal from trauma. So I thought that her website just has a ton of resources, and I'm happy to send out the PowerPoint with the recording of the call so you all can get this as well. And we do have a webinar coming up next week on Thursday with Anna Melvin, really focusing on increasing well-being through trauma-informed practices. So going beyond just being trauma-informed, but really focusing on well-being and what that means for survivors and how we can increase the survivors' well-being by doing things that are also trauma-informed. So she's wonderful, and I'm excited for this webinar. So I hope you all can join us for that. And thank you. So I will talk to you all soon, I'm sure.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.